Hi, kitty cats. What is a woman? Actually, no, don't answer that. It was always a trick question that acts as a gateway drug into conservative identity politics. Because modern conservative politics regulates identity, that is, who you are. And by shifting the focus from human rights to human behavior, conservatives will not stop at oppressing only the queer community. In fact, they won't stop until they redefine human as white, MAGA supporting men. This is why the founding fathers of the United States didn't enumerate valid identities in the Declaration of Independence. They enumerated unalienable human rights, and that distinction means everything. Because when a government leans into controlling who you are, you better damn well believe they're doing it so they don't have to protect who you are. All right, let me say hello to a few people already. I do see Margie is here. I know you're going off in a little bit. Hopefully all that goes well, Margie. I see Angela. I think I saw Genevieve earlier. And I see a few people on Twitch, so that's cool. Let me do my own introduction here. I'm Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I am both a scientist and a content creator. I discuss identity and gender through the lens of the scientific method, which is kind of different from what you might see on the internet today. You will find so much more information about me and the work that I do if you go to the website down below, which is purplepawclan.com. You will find a page just about me, my story. There you can find the social media networks that I'm on, and you can follow me. You can go to the blog page and you can read the articles that I write. You can go to the podcast page and listen to and watch the podcast that I do with exceptionally interesting people. There's also a page for the Discord server. You can join it there, be part of the solution by being part of the discussion. And finally, there is a page there about the hypnotherapy work that I do to help people work through some of these issues with identity and gender. Now, if you'd like to support my work, you can get a subscription on the website, purplepawclan.com, for as little as $5 a month. You can also sign up for my free newsletter there that publishes about every 2 weeks. And if what you do is follow me on social media and like and share what I do, thank you so much. That is beautiful support right there. So finally, I also publish other people's work on the website. If you'd like to contribute your own original work in identity or gender, I hope you will email me using the contact page finally on the website, which for the last time, purplepawclan.com. Okay. Let me see. Let me start here with why I'm doing this particular live stream. You know, I'm seeing that in the I'm seeing in the comments that, you know, we're talking about oppression, right? That people being oppressed. In particular, I see Angela talking about the UK Supreme Court decision, or the EHRC guidance that came out that does say something about, oh, we have to care about biological sex. It all comes down to oppression. Oh, there's my wife. Hi, hon. So I want to talk about the reason I'm doing this is I want to talk about how we got from rights to labels. Now, as I was researching positive news for yesterday's transgender joy video, I'm struggling to say that, because I do this every week, right? I'm trying to find 3 stories that are at least positive, vaguely positive news about the gender diverse community, the whole queer community. Now, in doing this, I came across an article that discussed a book called Trans Pleasure on Gender Liberation and Sexual Freedom. The author of the book, I believe it was published in 2019, so it's not even all that brand spanking new. The author is Professor Brandon Andrew Robinson. And if you're out there, Brandon, hey, give me a call. I'd love to interview you. I'm actually going to reach out to you. Brandon is an associate professor of gender and sexuality studies at the University of California at Irvine. Now, what caught my eye is that one of the main themes of the book is actually to abolish labels. And Professor Robinson isn't talking about abolishing labels for the queer community or the queer identity. It's abolish labels, including straight identities as well. The author argues that labels hold back human progress. That when we argue about words, we miss the actual argument. which is typically not about the language we use, but about the way humans treat each other. And if I may just, speak briefly, Angela's bringing up the CHRC guidance, and what that says uses a phrase biological sex, which has no true meaning. Right? I've done a live stream about this. Here they're talking about let's just make the language something, that describes what we want, how we want to regulate people, how we want to treat each other. So it's not about language. Usually we talk about the way we want to treat each other. So it so happened that the 3 stories I found for Transgender Joy kind of leaned into that thesis. The Trump administration wants to reduce funding to hospitals that offer gender-affirming care. Colorado's Supreme Court actually just rejected that. And the point here, the Trump administration's point, isn't to help people get better health care. It's to make sure that people they don't like don't get health care. The other story I had, Nepal created a specific ministry to advocate specifically for women, children, and gender and sexual minorities, because they realize pretty well that minorities are typically marginalized. And these particular minorities are pretty obvious. So having people to watch over the government and the actions that they take is appropriate, because Nepal, at least, wants to prevent the marginalization from getting worse. And they're actually including gender and sexual minorities in that. And then the last story I had was about Canada. Canada has a pilot program to allow gender diverse refugees to change identity documents immediately when they enter the country. These people are refugees because their government wants to limit their free expression. And they do this in part by preventing them from getting legal documentation, which, of course, in a country in this day and age is going to limit your ability to express who you are, do what you want in a country. Now, the uniting principle here is control, nothing more. A government can control its citizens by preventing them from being valid, which is to say valid in the eyes of the government. This is a new form, I will say, of identity politics. And it was really identity politics that Brandon Andrew Robinson rebels against. In their eyes, when a government is focused on regulating who you can be, it loses track entirely of human rights, which is to say, from whom you should be protected. So when you're caring about who you can be, you give not a damn about from whom you need to be protected. So today what I have is a deeper dive into identity politics, as well as why I agree wholeheartedly with Professor Robinson. When we focus on words and definitions and labels, we willingly discriminate against ourselves, and we don't realize we're giving up our basic human rights in the meantime. So this is going to begin with a bit of history on identity politics, just where it began, and then where it's gone. I have 2 actions from the United States government that show how identity politics is now weaponized. Then we're going to revisit the question, what is a woman? Because it exemplifies exactly what conservatives want to accomplish. And then we're going to talk about how we can move beyond labels to bring human rights back to the forefront. All right, let me check a couple of comments here. I did see this. So Margie says the same gender definition bill has passed first reading in the New Zealand legislature. I saw that they're floating stuff about biological sex, and I hope that, given how Australia has been pretty good about it, I hope New Zealand as well, with all of this in the all of them in the general area. Hopefully that all just goes right the hell out the window, because so ridiculous. So Margie then says she's yet to encounter a government anywhere that actually gives a rat's ass about fundamental human rights. We're going to talk about this. I don't disagree. Okay, I'm going to say flat out, I don't disagree, but that's supposed to be the point. This is supposed to be the foundation. I'm not even going to just say of the United States. I'm going to say of Western society. The idea of individual rights. And some of this goes back quite a ways, right? The Magna Carta, 13th century document. So, they may only be paying lip service to it, but we need to hold them to that. And so this point is well taken. Thank you, Margie. Um, Thistle says, first of all, hello, Thistle. The year is 2026. We don't have flying cars yet, but we argue about what gender is. So that's progress, I guess. Right? What in the what? So now Bo says what they're doing is trying to oppress people to make them less than them. So true. Thank you. And that's exactly the big point that I'm going to end up going into. And we'll get there. Actually, let me go ahead and do it. Do this right now. So let's talk first about just the history and the development of identity politics. And maybe you've never heard this phrase before. So let's start off with a definition of identity politics. It's politics based on a specific identity. Maybe you're going, that sounds like a tautomer. Thanks a lot. I mean, the phrase originally came from the feminist movement. Now, early feminism, obviously, at least allegedly, focused on women. But it really focused on white women, right? It was white women who did this. Now, around the 1970s, the phrase was coined, the phrase identity politics was coined to demonstrate how feminism actually is different for different identities, which is to say, specifically, advocating for Black women is different from advocating for white women, because there are just differences in the two experiences, the way that the two women, one white, one Black, would have grown up. This led it eventually. I'm not going to stay on feminism for too long, because this led eventually to seeing intersectionality as the best way to discuss identity. It's not about white, not about Black, not even necessarily about women. It's about how all of the influences on a person's life makes them the person they are. And if you're curious, there's obviously a heavy influence on that idea through and by critical theory, which is to say that the products of a particular time and people cannot be entirely separated from everything that affected the time and people. So it sounds like these ideas should be very powerful, like exceptionally powerful, right? I mean, a couple of logical conclusions come out of it. The first is that no one identity is a monolith, right? There's no white experience, there's no Black experience, there's no single queer experience. There's no experience that lies entirely isolated from a greater human experience. And that human experience ends up being unique to every person. The corollary of that, or perhaps not corollary, but the ancillary point to that is that, second, if you're going to judge a person, you have to judge their behavior. You can't judge an identity like, oh, this person's white, this person's Black. You have to look at what they're trying to accomplish and judge that. So, and we'll go back to that particular point, believe me. There were some other criticisms that have been, applied to identity politics. Interestingly, on one side, socialists have said that focusing on identity undermines collective goals, because now you care about one person. You're not talking about class struggles. A valid point. And then ironically, when you look at the right wing, conservatives criticize it for being, by definition, collectivist. I don't know. Political philosophy apparently doesn't have a whole lot of agreement in it, right? Conservatives criticize identity politics for focusing on one person and not alleged universal political truths. Like what Margie was just saying there, fundamental human rights. So what's happened in the past few decades? What's happened is that politics has actually made a big shift. It's made this shift, and I don't think this is only the past couple of decades, but hey, Matt is here, and thank you so much for the gift. Politics has shifted from being about universal truths and more about how to define or how to limit identities, which is to say our governments, and I'm going to say governments, have been concerned with how to make its citizens into its image. They're not interested in advancing the greater purpose of humanity. And I don't think there's anywhere this is more obvious than in the recent rise of of MAGA. And we'll go into some of these stories, but the big point is that MAGA doesn't care about individual rights. They don't give a flying fuck about the principles that were supposed to have founded this country. The underpinning of classical conservatism has been thrown out the window, just completely gone. They don't care. They don't want to give you life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness unless you agree with and express the identity that MAGA wants you to have. Don't be fooled if you're out there going, no, MAGA cares about something. No. This isn't about your rights. It's not about their rights. It's about regulating who you are. And when a government regulates who you are, that helps you forget about what you're supposed to be entitled to. Things like life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. So let's look at one example first. This one comes from the Vermont State Senate, where one fool apparently can't separate gender from species. So let me check things here. So Thistle got in with a different account. Hi, Thistle. Still here. Yeah, Angela says the main political parties in the UK are all against transgender people, but 2 minor parties are fighting for transgender rights. I find it fascinating that the UK has gone down the same road that is happening here in the US. I can't say I'm surprised. I think that MAGA has become an illness, and we are going to go down that road. Believe me, I'm not, and I swear it'll be good. I don't want to be pushing this point off, but I'm stunned that this has become like a global sort of thing. It's infected Western society. I find that fascinating. Angela then goes on to say, we are all a sum of our past experiences. Agreed. Right? We have, in at least my theory of identity, we have a base level of knowledge about who we are, and then our identity is an accretion around that grain of sand. It turns into the pearl of identity based on our past experiences. There's no way you can say, well, your experience is decidedly white in UK. You can say that it had those influences, but boy, if there's, more that you've done, it can't be ignored. So, oh boy. Yeah, here we go. The whole steroid Olympics BS is a telling statement about gender-affirming attitudes and actions being admirable only when they're for people who are cisgender. Yeah, boy, isn't that true? Matt says they care about power and control and money. That's it. So true. That's MAGA in a nutshell. 100%. And then Bo says they're trying to distract us from their corruption. Absolutely, it's a distraction. What's sad is that I don't think it's only MAGA. When it comes down to it, I think it's actually all politicians. We'll get there. I think the worst offenses come from MAGA. So let me get there. We have some Vermont State Senate fools. One anyway, at least one. Vermont State Senator Steve Heffernan. If you're out there, Steve, don't bother calling me. I want to talk to you. Brandon, if you're still out there, yeah, give me a ring. Anyway, Vermont State Senator Stephen Heffernan. Maybe he's not going to surprise you to hear. He's a Republican. He equated, ultimately, this is in the past week, he equated gender diversity to bestiality. Now, how do we get to this point? He conflates you knowing how you express gender with self-identification as an at base unspecified entity. Let me say that again. You know what you like in terms of gender. You're the only person who can tell others what you like about gender. This is called self-identifying the person you are. And this guy conflates you identifying your gender. Oh, Margie, good luck, okay? This guy conflates you identifying your gender with you identifying as a dog and engaging in, things with your dog that are apparently illegal. Believe it or not, this was actually in a debate about a bill to outlaw bestiality. Now I'm going to tell you, I don't know why they need that particular bill in Vermont, but I'm not here to talk about that. The point is that Vermont State Senator Stephen Heffernan equated your understanding of your identity with someone calling themselves a dog in order to engage in intercourse with it legally. Now, the obvious purpose here, for what it's worth, is to dump on the queer community. That much is true. But the deeper level is to dehumanize queer identity, which is to say that anything that is not cishet normative must also be deviant. Deviant to the point of bestiality, which, again, apparently Vermont needs to regulate, really, really hard, I guess. So remember this point, okay? Deviant to the point of bestiality. They're trying to dehumanize queer identity. Remember dehumanization. We're gonna return to it. This one is a particularly egregious example of dehumanization, and it's only made possible by misunderstanding, maybe, I'm gonna say maybe, willfully, what identity even means. Because identity to this guy, at least in this one conversation, is about having sex with animals. Which means maybe he's the reason the bill had to be introduced in the first place. They're like, you know what, Steve, come, let me pull you aside, Steve. We're going to have to introduce a bill against you, Steve, okay? But identity is not about having sex with animals, okay? It's about a whole person and what they know about themselves and what they choose to express. And sure, it might involve what the bill sought to limit, but identity is not about putting one word on something. It's what you know you are inside, whether or not a single word is going to exist to describe it. So knowing this, now we can move on to a greater government action. This is how Trump and his administration, kind of use that word hesitantly, how Trump and his administration want to weaponize the FCC even further. You may have seen Trump has already gone after people who criticize him, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert. Now he wants to go after the queer community in a very big way. All right, let me check. Thistle's asking, wait, is bestiality not illegal in Vermont? I don't know. Originally I read the headline of this and I'm like, well, what the hell were they talking about? And I read the article and I'm like, oh my God, that's an actual bill. This is a bill that was floated. They are arguing about this bill, and this guy goes, well, wait a minute, what if I identify as a dog? I realize the bill says person, but if people can identify as dogs, doesn't this just get thrown out the window? And then, interestingly enough, after he got yelled at, he wasn't able to make the vote. He ended up abstaining from the vote. In his words, his pizza must have kicked in right about then. Anyway, I don't know. Apparently, it's still legal in Vermont. Okay, I don't know. I'm not going to go check. Oh, hey, Dodgy Archetype. Dodgy Archetype says usually bestiality is something that's considered so obviously wrong that lawmakers forget actually to outlaw it. I think that's true. I think you end up, you're just like, well, do we really have to make these laws? And yeah, ultimately, if you end up with somebody, you have to make the law. But, Thistle says she forgets where, maybe in the Middle East area, but bestiality is legal, but only for men, and only if the animal is female. I'm loving that. The point, it's only if it's a heterosexual bestial relationship, that's okay. We're cool with that, okay? Wow. And thank you, Matt, for being here as well, now that Margie's gone. All right. Let me talk about the queer community versus the FCC. Let's make sure that we all understand the basics, okay? Because, what the hell does the FCC do in this day and age? So the FCC, that is the Federal Communications Commission. It's originally founded, I don't remember the exact year, 1909, maybe 1902, somewhere in that area. I think the first decade of the 20th century. But it was founded when humans began to use radio transmissions for communication. In fact, this is history that you end up having to know to get in like a ham radio license, right? An amateur radio license. In fact, it's exactly why I make this joke about an FCC mandated station identification in these live streams, because that's one of the regulations you agree to in order to use certain frequency bands of radio airwaves. So the FCC was created to make sure that radio transmissions ultimately were not disruptive. And that is to say, not disruptive in the case of an emergency. So if you have an important communication that needs to be transmitted, right, an emergent type of a situation occurring, you have a communication that needs to be transmitted, the government wanted to know radio waves would be available for this to happen. So the FCC ends up breaking the whole frequency spectrum into bands. Of course, these bands are not consistent across countries, because why would you do something like that? That seems foolish. So you have police, the police have their frequency bands for radio communication, ham radio people, amateur radio people. There's other frequencies for communication. If you're watching this on wireless internet, that's another frequency band for communication. But public broadcasting companies also use certain bands to transmit video and audio content. Now, when radio waves became obsolete, and this happened, right? This happened first with cable TV programming. It's expanded, obviously, with streaming services like what we're on now. These are forms of communication that don't use public airwaves. Like, you're probably paying for internet access. And if you're not, somebody's paying for internet access somewhere. These are privately owned, often privately owned networks. Not always, but often privately owned. Now, this is very powerful. This is very powerful to have a private form of communication, because you can say whatever the hell you want on these platforms. The fairness doctrine is out the window. This at least was an FCC mandate, which mandated public stations that they broadcast both sides of a political argument. The equal time doctrine, that's out the window. This mandated that public stations made themselves equally available to political candidates. So the political candidates, if one person was able to spend an hour talking about, their political platform, the public station was mandated to give the same to another political candidate. All of this was intended to say, well, look, we don't want to push one particular political platform, because that's not what our government is about. We're not about telling people what to believe. We're about protecting them from other people who don't believe what they do. Private broadcasting means you can control the message. That's how I do what I do. Unfortunately, it's also how Fox News does what it does too. Because I don't have to consider any other message other than my own. I mean, I do pop up comments, right? I do. But I don't have to consider any other message other than my own. Maybe you've seen, sometimes I get ugly comments, right? In the comments. I don't bother to show those. You can suck it. If you don't contribute to the conversation, you can go somewhere else. Anyway, the government is unable to regulate private broadcasting platforms like me, right? They only have a charter to regulate public broadcasting platforms. This is what the FCC does. The FCC technically has the charter to regulate public broadcasting platforms. And that's exactly what the Trump administration wants to weaponize. We saw Trump go after Jimmy Kimmel last year. Well, I mean, the company that owns the whatever. Ultimately, Disney pulled Jimmy Kimmel off the air for like a week because they were threatened. Well, not directly, but they were indirectly threatened with not having their public broadcast license renewed, which is a pretty big deal. Okay? It would turn that broadcast station off entirely. We've also seen Trump now go off and go after Stephen Colbert. And of course, Stephen Colbert's last show was this past Thursday. And once again, there were indirect threats of complicating a license renewal, because you have to do this I don't know what it is with like like ABC or CBS. I mean, you need to renew your license every 10 years. This is what it is with a ham radio license. I don't know what it is for like ABC or CBS, NBC, I don't know. But you have to renew them, and the FCC has sole discretion on whether or not they should give it to you. So now we see Trump's FCC, trying to regulate words on public broadcasts. They are floating the idea of mandating warning labels on public broadcasts, but only warning labels on public broadcasts that talk about something other than the cishet normative subjects that they approve. Now think about this, what this might have meant. Just think about the history of broadcasting. This would have meant no Will and Grace. Pretty influential show. This would have meant no Ellen DeGeneres. I mean, it might not have included MASH. Probably wouldn't have included Family Ties, sure as shit. No All in the Family. Anything that goes against what white Christian nationalism mandates is just the fuck out. And yes, I get it. We're talking only about a warning label. But think about how much of an impact warning labels on music have been. Explicit lyrics were a death knell to an album, to an artist, back in the 80s and in the 90s, pretty much until streaming music became the norm, where you didn't have to care. Right now you're paying this. It's not public airwaves you're playing this music on. And just to be clear on this, that regulation, that particular explicit lyrics, did not affect people like, was the Boot Scoot Boogie guy, right? Nobody cared about Boot Scoot Boogie or the Friends in Low Places. Who the hell is that? Miley Cyrus's dad. Billy Ray Cyrus? There we go. Billy Ray Cyrus. And Garth Brooks. Nobody cared about them. They're white bread, Midwest Americana. Who the hell cares? They probably don't have to write songs about hiding from the cops, like, say, Ice-T. They don't have to write songs about blurring their existence out of their own mind, like, say, Snoop Dogg. No, these people were able to, do what they did, and nobody cared. So it very unfairly, very disproportionately affected the hip-hop community, which was just really coming into its own. The purpose of this regulation, for Christ's sake, is not to protect children. I just used a Christian expletive there. What the hell? The purpose of this regulation is not to protect children. This floated FCC mandate. You're not protecting children. You're not protecting adults from stumbling onto something that horrifies them, because all you have to do is turn on a news channel. There's more than enough war and blood and guts. And underneath that, more than enough hate and discrimination. There's more than enough profanity out there. This isn't about keeping the airwaves safe. Not even close. This is about regulating who gets to put a message out in public. Specifically, it's queer people. Queer people are to be censored. It's not about safety. It's about controlling identity. When you can put a warning label on the typical human experience, you turn it into contraband. This is to strip the queer experience out of the human experience. And we've seen queer stories of gender and sexual diversity across human history. This is to show it as, to pose it as deviant, to pose it as dangerous. Now, I told you to remember this from the Vermont state senator, right? His argument was solely done to dehumanize gender diverse people. This FCC conversation is all about dehumanizing the entire queer community. So now we can move to the most egregious regulation of identity of them all. What is a woman? Matt Walsh says, "Hey, I'm just asking questions." But that was the entry point ultimately, from MAGA's regulation of who is fit, who is allowed to be human. All right, let me check these here. Good point. So Bo says that GMRS and ham licenses are different licenses. I forget what GMRS stands for. General, maybe Matt, you remember. Police, but I mean, obviously, police frequencies are different as well. So yeah, GMRS, which is not one that you necessarily have to take an exam for, whereas you do with the amateur radio licenses. GMRS, you still have to do station identification. You still are supposed to say your call sign, your station call sign every 10 minutes. And that's the way it is with ham radio licenses as well, to tell your call sign every 10 minutes. Good. Thistle says the cafe is paying for her internet. Good job. I don't know so the BBC. So I'm going to tell you. So you brought up the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. I'm going to tell you, I don't know a whole lot about the charter for UK broadcasting. Yeah, maybe I'll let it go from there. Thistle says content warning. The following subject matter has been identified as gay. Can you imagine seeing that? It's going to have to go on pretty much every show, except for, like Joel Osment. What's his name? Joel Osgood? Who cares? Except for Austin. Who the hell cares? Honestly, I don't care. Only his is the only thing that's not going to get a warning. Bo says Billy Bob's good enough to describe Billy Ray Cyrus. He did give birth to, well, he didn't give birth. Sorry. He helped, get Miley Cyrus born. And I think Miley's okay. She's all right. Right. See, Anne Bonny, Mary Reed. Come to think of it, was sort of shit did Calico Jack think he was getting into. Yeah. Oh, what are we going to do? Don't tell mom. I'm going to move on. Actually, let me do my FCC mandated station identification. See, now you have the joke, all the background of the joke. I'm Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I talk about identity and gender through the lens of the scientific method. And today we are talking about actually how conservative identity politics has weaponized definitions to the point where you don't get to exist anymore. And that's what we're going to talk about, weaponizing definitions. Perhaps you remember, Matt Walsh made a documentary. Don't we put that in quotes? It was about as good as like Spinal Tap. And to me, it's like, Christopher Guest type documentaries, okay? Made a document, except at least Christopher Guest is funny and talented. There's that too. So Matt Walsh made something he published in 2022, where supposedly what he wanted was to define what woman was. It's really a platform, ultimately, to challenge gender identity. Which is to say, you may recall from when we talked about the Vermont state senator, your ability to tell other people, who you are. So Matt Walsh pretends to interview, politicians, academics, because his argument is that, well, woman shouldn't be that hard to define, right? And yet he has 94 minutes worth of how are these people not able to define woman? The movie, the thing that was published, and the entire MAGA movement, well, for that matter, gender critical people, TERFs, etc., they have their own allegedly simple definition, which is adult human female. You may recall I've rejected this particular phrase, and it's not about adult, right? This is a political definition. It's really, at what age should a child be held responsible for their actions? Perhaps if you go to Vermont, certainly in the Southeast, you could say alternatively, it's at what age should an adult be able to have sex with a child? But this isn't one of the harder parts of the definition. That's political. Let it go. The hard part is also not female. Even if you go with the idea of cluster characteristics to define a particular word, we could come up with a heuristic or whatever, Simone de Beauvoir right now, rolling over in her grave. And of course, there is a clear definition of sex given by biologists. I've covered that from here to back, so I'm not going to cover it again now either. The hard part here is human. The Founding Fathers wrote in the Declaration of Independence that all humans, and I know I'm paraphrasing, are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among them the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We've seen this our whole lives. I'd go so far as to say this idea now permeates the entire Western political philosophy, and I've spoken about this at length, so I'm not going to discuss it too much, other than to say humans have these rights purely by the sake of being human, which is to say, no government grants these rights. It's not like the FCC. It's not like laws preventing you from engaging in acts that might harm an animal. These rights exist because you were born a human and nothing else. These rights are inherent in being born human. Because the point is, when you're looking to regulate people entirely, when what you want to do is strip them of their dignity, strip them of their identity, and when it would appear too obvious to go after the actual rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, just go change the meaning of the word human. That is exactly what conservative identity politics has become. This is why we have Vermont state senators equating gender with bestiality. This is why we have the FCC considering warning when content falls outside cishet norms. The purpose is to redefine what human means legally and ultimately to redefine it as white, MAGA-supporting man. We aren't fighting about innate human rights. Conservatives don't believe human rights fucking exist anymore. Conservative politicians believe they get to define what is human and what rights certain people should have. And they do it by regulating identity. If your identity is not one covered by their definition of human, you don't get to exist. You don't get rights. You don't get to be the person you are. Instead, you get to be hated. You get to be discriminated against. You get to be destroyed. And we've seen this before in history. This is exactly, I don't know if Anita is here, this is exactly what Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf. He was pretty damn specific, okay? But nobody really believed he was going to go that far. And that's because we live with the idea that individual human rights are innate to humanness. We can't believe that any government would advocate to strip us of identity. But that's what the Trump administration is doing. That's what MAGA is all about. And that, ultimately, is what Brandon Andrew Robinson was getting into. We're fighting over words. We're fighting over labels. We're fighting over definitions. And by doing that, we allow ourselves to lose basic human rights. So now we can talk about how to fight this. How labels should not be our first line of defense, and how we need to go back to asking what politicians are trying to accomplish, not the words they want to use to cover up their ulterior motives. So let's see. So Angela says right here, the BBC is paid for by the UK people and it has to impartially produce a variety of programs. I mean, impartial's a slippery word. And I mean, you could say ultimately that all, hi, Alex Zebra. That's a fun name. You could say that all the U.S. Broadcasting companies are paid for by us. I mean, it goes, they sell advertising. The point of advertising is for somebody to go, oh, I'm going to buy that thing. I need some Tidy Bowl in my life. I sure am glad that somebody made a commercial. So at least, out of, indirectly, we pay for this programming, but I don't. Thistle says Top Gear was good. I'm going to tell you, I don't know what Top Gear is. Am I too old? Maybe I'm too old. If I am, sorry. It's already 2:44. Let me move on to the real point here. On gender liberation and sexual freedom, right? I want to return to what I said at the beginning. Andrew Robinson's book, Trans Pleasure on Gender Liberation and Sexual Freedom, Robinson advocates for the abolishment of labels. Why labels? Because words do not define us. Action does. What conservatives want to do, what we're watching conservatives do, is redefine words. And what liberals, in fact, many of us, I'm not even going to say just me as a liberal, I'm saying many of the people who try to fight against this, we're trying to fight the definitions. We want to fight words with definitions. And so language has become the battleground. In fact, the word human has become the ultimate battleground. And that approach, going against that, is always going to be doomed to fail. Hi, Alex. Oh, and you reminded me. Thank you, Thistle. Yeah, it was about cars. I do remember that bit. So language has become the battleground. And here's the point. That approach is always doomed to fail to fight against it because language is created to serve humans. It's never the other way around. And yes, we can fight the good fight by ridiculing politicians as they ridicule us. If they're going to say that words are scientific, right, that there are scientific reasons for using the words we do, then certainly we should be able to call the President of the United States Donnie on the John, Trump. Donnie on the John. Because Donnie on the John is scientifically the same as Donald John. We can call the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, we can call him Little Bobby Foo-Foo. Right, Little Bobby Foo-Foo K. Jr. Because Bobby certainly is scientifically the same as Robert. We can call the Director of the FBI Dead Presidents Patel. Because Dead President certainly is scientifically the same as Cash, right? We can call the Secretary of Defense Penis Hegseth, because penis is scientifically the same as Peter, isn't it? Cracking myself up. Now, I'm not saying you should use these in your daily life, but you should probably use these in your daily life. At least Penis Hegseth. When we talk about the individual rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, I'm going to bring us back down. When we talk about the individual rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, they are founded on one characteristic. One, this is the most basic characteristic of all the human experience, and it's the ability to tell other people who you are. This includes your name, your pronouns. This includes what you like, what you don't like. This includes what you intend to do with the life you have. And part of what we as humans have done is put our identity into boxes. We make labels, we assume labels. I call myself a pansexual transgender woman. That's 3 labels at the very least. But labels are not the same as the experience. And your identity can be easily destroyed by a politician changing the meaning of a label. And what's interesting, this is actually what a social construct is, right? You get enough people to believe this is the definition of a label, here's what you got. Despite conservatives continually poo-pooing the idea of social constructs, specifically around gender, they use it as a weapon incredibly well by redefining words and pretending they mean something other than what they do. By pretending that gender can turn into bestiality, by pretending that queer can be something that's dangerous, by pretending that woman has some vague definition that they can manipulate by playing around with the word human. There is only one way to fight this, and that's to abandon labels. The original concept behind identity politics led to intersectionality, led to critical theory, which is to say, we don't judge any one vertex in a set of intersections. We don't judge race, we don't judge sex or age, gender presentation, state or religion. We judge the actions that person intended to take. People are not labels. People are behavior. And labels, when weaponized, become nothing more than cover-ups for poor behavior. So dump the labels and hold people accountable for behavior. Yes, even if they're in your political party. Yes, even if they're supposed to be a good Christian. And yes, even if they're there, like your parents, saying they're there to help you. Politics has become about regulating identity, redefining the word human so that you won't get the rights that politicians don't want you to have. And the way out is not to argue about labels. The way is to refocus. The way out is to refocus our attention on why those rights existed in the first place. Don't give up who you are. Don't give up your identity, but give up those labels that are holding you back. When a label, whether it's pejorative or whether it's used kindly, when a label loses its meaning, the label loses its power. And that power is the power that politicians want to hold over you. I didn't think it'd take me 50 minutes to get to the point of all I had to talk about today, but that was it. All right, let me check comments. Boy, all of a sudden I got a bunch. Yeah, well, so Dodgy Archetype says, the way the BBC achieves its impartiality is via centrism. Yeah, doesn't care what's true, only what people think. I'm going to go with that. Go with you on that. I do still think there's a difference between truth, capital T, what we want to believe is true, and, what we actually observe. Nobody cares about what we observe. Hi, Frybird, by the way. Hello, Frybird. Yeah, here we go. Right. So Thistle now says, yeah, how anarchy has been redefined to mean ungoverned bedlam. What about Antifa? Right? I mean, Antifa was, anti-fascism. But fascism has now been redefined to mean what Democrats do in some way, or what I'm doing with woke gender ideology, which has no meaning either, right? Woke gender ideology? What the fuck does that mean? Nobody knows. And it doesn't make a difference what it means, because what they're doing is just saying it's wrong. They're giving it a pejorative meaning without actually defining it. And so those are other great examples there. Anarchy and everything. Bo says, Bo says that Donald Trump thinks he's smart because he completed the maze on the back of the kids menu at TGI Fridays. I mean, I saw an article recently that he keeps saying, "Oh, I had an intelligence test," and I forget the name of it, but it's like a cognitive fitness test. And this guy was like, well, I was able, the guy who took this cognitive fitness test said, yes, I was able to tell the date. I was able to give my name, and then was like, you know what? You don't want a president who has to take this exam. You don't want somebody that they're like, you know what? We should probably check your fitness. What's your name? What's the day of the week? What city are you in? Like, that's a bad sign. And I wholly agree. So Frybird says, enumerate me, baby. I'm on the way. I love this, right? So Prime Minister Keir Starmer in the UK, if you weren't paying attention, was not able to say what a woman is in relation to transgender women. No, of course not. What does biological sex mean? Nobody can define that. Ultimately, what it comes down to, and I did a whole live stream on this, but it comes down to ultimately assigned sex at birth. Like, what do you have outside? Are we going to run a comprehensive karyotype analysis on every single person? Forget about karyotypical. You're going to have to run like a full genome, right? A full genotype on every person. It's stupid. Nobody knows what biological sex even means. We just keep on making up different definitions for it and going, you know what? This is going to help. This will definitely help. We had a Supreme Court, none of whom is, a scientist, and they said, well, it should be biological sex. Well, what does that mean? And they went, well, it's really up to somebody else to define what the guidelines ought to be. We just, Anyway, it's time for tea. We're off. We're popping off. Off we pop. Robert says she labels items because someone gave her a label maker. I think that's great. I think you should always have label makers. Oh, Subix has started following. Thank you. Oh, I better cough. Hang on a second. I don't know why, but yesterday, like in the afternoon, my throat started hurting, and I was like, "Am I going to be able to do this? Especially if I'm going to get all ranty." I can already tell it may have may have affected my voice. But hello, Charity Ann. Thank you, Frybird, for the gifts. Shakespeare, hello. Good to see you. It's good to see you. We absolutely all deserve to live safely. I agree with you so much, Frybird. Shakespeare brings up they have been learning in politics, learning about politics, being in a campaign of transgender women building a coalition of marginalized voices. We need to empower our identities and demand our voices be heard. I think this is exactly the argument. When you can say that these voices are not human, you can say we don't need to listen to them. So Shakespeare, I think that's exactly the point, is to say, hold up, you're not going to redefine human without including the entire human experience, which includes sexual diversity, which includes gender diversity. You're not going to do it. And that's what conservatives are trying to do, and that's what sucks. It's okay. It's okay, Frybird, if you're spamming the chat. It's good. Oh, here we go. So Shakespeare goes on to say the coalitions in question being primarily with restorative justice, queer advocacy groups. I called it queer. I'll say LGBTQ plus advocacy groups and sovereign nations. Ooh, good. Wow. Bring that in too. We can move on to all being human when the legislative is economically equal for us. Here's the point. I don't think you will ever have a legislation that is economically equal for all people unless you make sure that the word human really applies to every human. I feel like you're putting a cart before a horse here. You don't need to move on to people being human, or you don't need to move on to whether or not people should have economic privileges until everybody is considered human. This is my opinion. I'm not saying you're totally wrong, Shakespeare, but there we go. Right, here we go. So Frybird says this is not what's the cognitive test called? It's like Thompson or Friedrichsen cognitive thing. Frybird, tell me what it is. Anyway, she says they give part of it to schizophrenic patients on every visit. Yes, that's what they're giving this guy. It's the kind of thing that you go, man, we did not want a leader who needed to take this test. All right, bye, Prince X Thistle. Yeah, so Frybird says this test is to make sure they see reality. Yeah, phenomenal. So I like this one. So Bo says woke. This means that you understand other people's views and positions. I'm with you on that. I like the idea, and it's kind of funny because by rebelling against this idea of woke, rebelling against the particular word woke, what it means is that, anybody who is not aware of other people's views and positions must be asleep. And Trump certainly exemplifies that, certainly shows that in meetings, right? Every goddamn day I'm seeing a picture of this guy like this. It's like drool, like you, oh, hang on. Oh, sorry, what were you talking about? Were we talking, what? Just go back to sleep? Okay. Can I have the Zwi back later? Okay. Am I going to get the posits too, Zwi back and posits? Okay, I'm going back to sleep. That's what he does. Do you know? Yeah, because actually I've had this, right? You go into a psych ward. I was just testing it out 5 times. But when you go into a psych ward, right, you're supposed to be able to answer some of these questions, one of which is the current president of the United States. I would hope that he was able to answer who the current president is. But I just saw a post. Oh, I cannot call it a truth. I saw a post that came from Truth Social, whatever the hell it's called, that said the Biden FBI planted a bunch of people on January 6th, 2020. I guess 2020? When was it? Yeah, 2020, 22, 24? Why do I not know the year there? What the hell's wrong with me? 2020, I think. Anyway, He said the Biden FBI planted a bunch of people there. Now, who was president when the January 6th insurrection occurred? Trump was. I don't know if he'd be able to say who the current president of the United States is. I think you'd ask him, he'd be like, oh, Biden. No, wait. No, wait. Let me see. I'm king of the world. You asked for president. I'm king of the world. Fuck, I don't know who it is. They would be tough for him. Silly person. Oh no, I'm sorry. Frybird says she lost her voice completely. Ugh. There you go. I could have gotten hopped up on, on Dayquil. But it would be even more, random and stuff that, more random than I already am. Hi, Gigi. Good to see you. Oh, thank you. That's what it's called. The Mocha. I should have remembered this because that's also the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles. Not like that really explains why I should remember it, I suppose, right? Anyway, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Thank you so much, Dodgy Archetype. I appreciate that. Anyway. Yeah, I think Trump may still think that Obama's still president. Obama's living in his head rent-free. There's a lot of things living in that guy's head rent-free, isn't it? Oof. Unfortunately, not many of them are thoughts. And that's the bummer part of it. Oh gosh, it's already past 3. Somebody should have reeled me in. We don't have Margie here, but I'm thinking about still doing some of the game. Because at the very least, I'm so loving the game. Is so much fun. I'm so glad we started playing that one because I'm just like, woo, this is a lot of fun. So anyway, I would like to play it. Yes, this would be feral child game time. So I'll go ahead and pull that out. I don't know if Margie's going to get back in time to see any of this or not, but what we're going to do, I don't, it might be true though. What's that orange stain on the oval rug? Oh, that's Trump's drool. Dude, this is not your property. Don't mess it up. Oh, wait. Totally forgot about that wing of the White House you tore down. Yes, Frybird, if you want to call me later, go ahead. I'm up for it. All right, I'm going to take a 5-minute break is my point. Let me take a 5-minute break, and then we'll do feral child game time and make it through the rest of the evening here. So, or late afternoon, wherever you are. All right, here we go. Back in 5 minutes, and then we'll play. Hit the wrong button.